7 spine-chilling tales of sinister strangers hiding within the haunted walls of your home. The chilling hour had arrived. Shadows deepened in the corners of every darkened room, coiling like lurking serpents, and the walls of Jess's home pressed in around her like they were closing for the night. She had barely scraped a few hours of rest after a grueling night shift, and though her heart still raced from the adrenaline of her last patient, it now beat with a different panic. What was that rustling? It came from the walls. The whispers echoed through the hallways, soft, taunting, impossible to ignore. Were they real, or just figments of sleep-deprived hallucinations? Jess glanced around the empty living room. The quiet was oppressive, thickening the air until it was heavy with dread. Emma and Max, her 2 little ones, should have been tucked in bed by now, their soft snores filling the house with peace. Instead, she found herself standing paralyzed, scanning for the source of the unsettling sounds. There it was again, a faint rustle, as if something was shifting just behind the drywall. Her breath quickened and panic started to creep in. She shook her head, trying to push the fear away. It had to be exhaustion playing tricks on her. After all, stories of sinister neighbors and lingering spirits were just tales spun to frighten kids, right? As the hours dragged on, the feelings worsened. Each creaking floorboard beneath her feet turned into an ominous warning. The shadows seemed darker in her peripheral vision, and those whispers? They felt more like a calling, urging her to look deeper into the recesses of her own home. Whenever she returned from work, often too tired to truly assess her surroundings, a chill would run up her spine. She shook it off. She had to focus on her children. Protecting them was her priority, yet the terror escalated day by day. Last week, a neighbor had vanished without a trace, no warning, just gone. It was all over the gossip around town, feeding rumors and reigniting old legends about families that had mysteriously disappeared long before. And then there was Mr. Reed, the odd man next door with his haggard eyes that seemed to know too many secrets. Jess felt the prickling sensation of being watched whenever they crossed paths. She scrutinized him now, paranoia blossoming like weeds in her heart. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tonight, Jess resolved to confront her fears. The moon hung low, casting silver light across her path as she marched toward Mr. Reed's porch. The air crackled with anticipation, and when she reached him, his eyes glowed in the dark, an indifferent pair of reflectors watching her approach with a cruel amusement. The conversation turned to hushed whispers of families lost, their homes claimed by darkness, and fear turned to icy despair. As she stepped back, every instinct screamed at her to flee, yet something held her there, an unexplainable pull. Feeling the shadows grow heavier, Jess fled back home, but the feeling of dread intensified as her muscles tensed with an urgency that pushed her forward. The walls of her cherished home groaned under an unseen weight, and the whispers swelled louder, morphing from ghostly murmurs into blood-curdling screams echoing from her own memories. She could sense the grip of the darkness tightening. It felt alive, a sinister force yearning to envelop her family. Racing heart pounding, she reached for the bedroom door only to find it locked. A quick twist of the knob revealed nothing but darkness and maybe something worse. Shadows coalesced around her, breathing life into her fears. Would she succumb to the darkness gliding like a predator through her home, or would she unearth the truth, the hidden horror lurking behind those loyal walls? The air crackled with anxiety. Her family's safety depended on the choice she had to make. She stood on the threshold of terror and desperate courage as shadows clawed at her heels. What would the dawning light unveil? Would the families of Maplewood remain silent, or would she hear their cries? The air became more suffocating, like a thick fog tightening around Jess's throat. The locked door felt like a barrier not just to her children's room but to sanity itself. She swung her fists against the wood, panic clawing at her mind. Emma. Max. The silence that answered sent a chill through her bones. Suddenly, a low creaking echoed from the hallway, pulling her attention away from the door. It was slow, deliberate, as if something was moving just beyond her line of sight. Jess held her breath, the weight of fear weighing heavy in her chest. She slowly turned, ready to confront whatever darkness lurked behind her. At first, she saw nothing. Just the dim light filtering in from the windows, casting ghostly shadows that danced along the floor. But then, something shifted. A dark form slithered just out of view, just on the edge of her sight. Jess hesitated, caught between instincts that urged her to flee and those that pushed her to confront the unknown. "Who's there?" she croaked, her voice strained and trembling. No answer, just that oppressive silence that wrapped around her like a vice. Then it happened. A soft, childlike giggle echoed from the shadows. A familiar sound that twisted the knife of dread deeper into her gut. It was Emma's laugh, sweet and innocent, but oddly off-key, almost mocking. "Emma?" Jess called again, her heart racing to a frantic beat. She moved forward, every step heavy with unease. The laughter faded, replaced by whispers that melted together, like a hive of agitated bees buzzing all around her. The words swirled and clashed, incomprehensible yet jarring. She felt as though she were drowning in their unsettling harmonies. Jess crept further down the hallway, drawn toward the source of the laughter. Laughter that was a siren call, beckoning her into the unknown. She reached the living room and stopped dead in her tracks. The windows were wide open, curtains billowing like eager phantoms. A cold breeze swept through the room, chilly fingers brushing against her skin. On the sofa, a figure loomed tall and shrouded in shadows. It was a silhouette too familiar, too frightening. "Mommy!" The voice sent tremors through her body. It was Max, framed in darkness, but the face twisted and warped into something unrecognizable, a grotesque mockery of her son's innocence. His little hand stretched toward her, fingers elongated and distorted, as if being pulled by some unseen force. "Max! No!" Jess screamed, racing to him, but the moment she reached out, he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only silence. Heart pounding, she stumbled backward, feeling as if the walls were closing in. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. They were just sleeping, safe in their beds, weren't they? The whispers escalated, a cacophony now, screaming at her in panicked tones. Each syllable twisted another memory, unraveling her sanity like loose thread. She glanced around, desperately searching for her children, but the house was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, suffocating in its terror. Then she saw it, a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. A voice beckoned from inside, soft and melodic, a far cry from the earlier frenzy. "Mommy, come play!" Jess's instincts screamed for her to run, but a sick curiosity pulled her toward that dark portal. What lay beyond the threshold? Was it her children? Or an insatiable horror, waiting to consume her whole? As she stepped closer, the walls vibrated with unspoken fears, tightening her throat and squeezing her heart. With a deep breath that hung heavy in the air, she pushed the door open, ready to confront whatever nightmare awaited her. But as she crossed the threshold, the darkness roared back, engulfing her entirely. In that final moment, all she could hear was the echo of the innocent song, sweet and twisted, come play, and then silence. What awaited Jess when the shadows finally revealed their truth? In the depths of the darkness, a revelation lurked, and it craved flesh. Would she escape its grasp, or would she too become just another whispered tale echoing through the walls? A cold gust swept through the doorway as Jess stumbled into the void, the door slamming shut behind her with a deafening thud. Darkness enveloped her, thick and suffocating. Panic surged again, making her gasp for breath. "Max! Emma!" she shouted, her voice swallowed by the shadows. There was no response, only the mocking echoes of her own desperation, bouncing off unseen walls. The air felt charged, electric, a whisper of something lurking just out of sight. She reached out, her hand brushing against a damp wall. It was surprisingly warm, like it was alive. Her skin prickled, and the sensation slithered up her arm, making her jerk back. "Stay calm, Jess," she murmured to herself, though her heart raced like a caged animal. Creeping forward, she strained to listen. Was that a sound? A heartbeat? No, just the muted rhythm of silence, heavy and oppressive. The room felt impossibly vast, swallowing her whole. Shadows shifted at the corner of her vision. She turned her head sharply, but nothing remained, only flickers of darkness teasing her sanity. Then she heard it again, a giggle, soft yet sinister, weaving through the air. "Come play with us, Mommy." The voice was both Emma's and an echo of something far more sinister. It danced around her, taunting. "Where are you?" Jess called, fear clawing at her throat. The walls seemed to constrict tighter, and the temperature dropped. "Show yourself." As if on cue, a shape moved in the dark, a childlike figure darting just beyond her reach. Her heart leapt. Could it be Emma? "Max!" she cried, rushing forward. But every time she thought she was close, they flitted away, just another mirage in a hall of horrors. The shadows engulfed her, tendrils wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down. "Mommy, help!" a voice cried, shrill and desperate. "Help! I'm coming!" She lunged forward, gripping at the air, fingers curling around nothing. The ground beneath her shifted, warm and cold in sudden bursts, as if it were breathing. A chill raced through her spine, a cold whisper against her ear. "They're not here, they can't be found." The words echoed, and panic settled deeper. Struggling against the advancing dread, she pressed onward, arms outstretched in the dark. "Please, I'm right here. I'm going to save you." Her voice broke with tears, pooling in her desperation. The laughter returned, darker now, a chorus of twisted joy that surrounded her. She pressed her hands against the wall to steady herself, but the surface pulsed like a heartbeat. Jess's heart crashed against her ribs, the steady count a reminder of her own fragility. Had the house turned into something more? Then came the whispers, rising to a desperate crescendo. "Stay with us, Mommy." Forever fighting against the tide of despair, Jess stumbled towards the source of the laughter, her legs heavy as lead. Each step dragged her deeper into the maw of darkness, each breath filled with the bitterness of lost innocence. The sickening sound of tiny feet scuttling across the floor filled her ears. Were they behind her now? "Get away from me!" she shrieked, spinning around. The shadows thickened, swallowing her screams. They danced just out of reach, mocking her with their ghostly forms, and then, in the heart of darkness, she felt a cold hand brush against her wrist. Her blood ran icy as she spun, locking eyes with a figure she barely recognized. Max stood before her, eyes wide but empty, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "Mommy, come play with us." What had taken her children? What would she risk to save them? As she faced the striking horror now at her fingertips, the air thickened again, weighing her down with the promise of what awaited in the depths. But was it too late? Would she become part of the shadows, an echo of laughter trapped forever? Before she could process the thought, everything swirled into dark nothingness. Suddenly, a light flickered in the distance, a reality beyond her grasp. A sound rang out, a distant scream that might very well belong to her or something else. What truth lay hidden in that flicker? Would she reach it in time, or was the darkness hungry for the light? Jess's heart drummed in her ears as she pushed deeper into the void, the flickering light like a distant lighthouse in an ocean of despair. The darkness clung to her like a wet cloak, making it hard to breathe. She strained her eyes, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever lay ahead, but the shadows around her twisted and contorted, beckoning her back into their cold embrace. "Max! Emma!" she shouted again, her voice trembling. There was no answer, just the silence wrapping around her like a predator waiting to pounce. The warmth of that cold hand lingered on her wrist, sending shivers through her entire body. What had happened to her children? What had happened to her? Ignoring the instinct to flee, Jess pressed on toward the light, each step weighted with dread. The silhouette of a doorway began to take shape, a warped frame that seemed to shimmer against the darkness. As she approached, the whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of childlike laughter, now mixing with the distant screams she couldn't ignore. Her vision blurred as tears of frustration welled up. With a deep breath, she placed her hand on the door, feeling its rough surface pulse against her palm. "If you're there, please let me find you," she begged, her voice cracking. A soft giggle erupted from within, taunting her very soul. "Mommy, just a little closer." It was Emma's voice, sweet and sickening, laced with something unfathomably dark. She shoved the door open, stepping into another realm. The light engulfed her, a surreal brightness that painted a scene of twisted innocence. Toys lay strewn across the floor, but they were stained dark, like something sinister had seeped into the fabric of her memories. She could see shapes darting just beyond her sense of reach, figures with eyes glimmering in the light. "Max! Emma!" she called, desperation thickening her voice. She took a step further inside, feeling the cold fingers of the shadows grab at her ankles. "Where are you?" And then they appeared, their figures framed in blinding light, yet somehow hushed. Max stood, arms outstretched, a blank expression frozen on his face. Emma floated beside him, her hair tangled, eyes wide with a mix of fear and malice. Their smiles were uncomfortably bright, mouths too wide as they echoed, "Mommy, come play with us." The chill slicing through Jess was paralyzing. They were not just her children, they were something else, something that gleamed with the fabric of nightmares. "No. You're not my kids." She took a step back, her heart racing wildly against her ribs. The laughter morphed into howling, piercing her ears. "You're not real. Stay with us, Mommy, we can be together forever." The voice wrapped around her, slithering into her mind, fogging her thoughts. The walls began to ripple and pulse, shadows sliding up and down. Screams resonated in her core. She was trapped. The once comforting light dimmed, now only revealing deeper horrors lurking in its periphery. With a sudden resolve, she barreled toward them, summoning what strength she had left. "Get away!" she cried, resisting the pull of their fractured reality. But the shadows lunged, merging into one monstrous wave, threatening to engulf everything she loved. She felt her energy siphoned away, warmth draining as darkness threatened to twist her into a reflection of their smiles. Despair rushed through her veins. But she couldn't succumb. "Not yet." In a final act of defiance, Jess screamed, "I will find you. I will save you." The walls trembled around them, a confrontation of wills. But just as she felt the flicker of strength, a voice deeper than the darkness boomed, "You're too late." The ground beneath her cracked, and the shadows started to grin wider. What did it mean? Was this the end or a new beginning? As ignorance unraveled in dread, she hurried to pull herself together, racing against an encroaching darkness that craved her very essence. What was this shelter of terror? And could she escape its grasp before it swallowed her whole? Jess's lungs burned as she fought against the overwhelming darkness, the air thick and stale. The cracked ground beneath her rumbled in response to the deep voice. "You're too late." It echoed in her mind, feeding her fears. The warmth of love mixed with the icy grip of despair. She refused to succumb. "Max! Emma!" she cried again, desperation clawing at her throat. The shadows danced closer, each one a mass of dark intent, shimmering with the malice forming around her children's faces. "What do you want from me?" she shouted, stalling the inevitable. The walls undulated, reacting to her fear. They quivered and pulsed like a living thing, narrowing the space around her. The laughter once taken as innocent now twisted into a spine-chilling symphony that drowned out her thoughts. "Mommy, don't go." Emma's voice was sweet yet dripping with something sinister, a lure that tugged painfully at Jess's heart. She took a staggered step forward, but instinct kicked in. "No. She wouldn't be drawn into this mirage." The light flickered, revealing glimpses of more unspeakable horrors. The floor now rippled with sinister images, scenes of her worst nightmares playing out, each moment screaming for her attention. The joyous memories became a cruel facade, exposing the raw truth behind what lay hidden. "Stop it!" Jess yelled, terror bubbling inside her. She squeezed her eyes shut, blocking out the horrific visions. When she opened them, the scene before her morphed. Max moved, shifting suddenly from the frame of light. His expression morphed, an unsettling mix of fear and darkness zipping through his wide eyes. "Mommy," he whispered, and Jess felt a pull as if he were being yanked away. Her heart raced, the tender bond breaking as panic flooded her veins. "Hold on. I'm coming," she begged, reaching toward him, but something dark gripped him. Shadows twisted between them, dragging him deeper into the void. "No!" The cry ripped from her throat. Determination surged through her once more, igniting a spark in her chest. She raced forward, the laughter transforming into screams. But she wouldn't let them win. Jess plunged into the heart of that blinding light, pushing through the chaotic whispers and damning shadows. With every ounce of her strength, she reached for Max. His form shifted, writhing in the dark currents, but that tiny flicker of hope anchored in her heart was enough to keep her going. "Together. We can do this!" She screamed at the encroaching shadows. The ground shook violently beneath her, and the walls echoed with rage. She felt the darkness clawing at her skin, but she pushed forward, the dreams surrounding her cracking like glass. "Mommy!" Emma's voice whined, now sounding more like a serpent's hiss. "Why won't you come play?" "Because I won't lose you," Jess shouted, heart racing. With sheer will, she lunged toward her son, through the veil of shadow and the thinning light, wondering what pandemonium that awaited her. Suddenly, her hand connected with something solid. She grasped for him with all her might, but the sensation was fleeting. Max's expression shifted again, finally morphing into something she recognized: pain. That pain etched in his wide eyes cut through her like a knife. "Mommy," he begged, fading. The crack in the ground widened, threatening to swallow them whole. Jess screamed, a raw, primal sound that resonated through the dark expanse. "I want to let you take them." But it was then that the darkness congealed around her, reshaping itself, revealing a face formed from shadows. It held a terrifying grin, impossibly wide, featuring rows of jagged teeth. "You'll never find them. You belong to us now," it whispered, the sound crawling under her skin. Stumbling back, Jess's breath quickened as the air swirled with more laughter. She could feel the pull of despair, tightening like a noose around her. But she couldn't give in now, she had to keep fighting. With one last desperate effort, Jess called out, "Max! Emma! I'm coming!" And just then, a new sound pierced the darkness, an echo of hope that was familiar yet elusive, pulling at her heart in a way she couldn't yet comprehend. What was it? Could they be reaching out to her, or was it a trick of the demons lurking? With dread thickening the air around her, she braced for whatever new terror lay ahead. The darkness hissed, shifting around her like a predator stalking its prey. Jess could feel the weight of despair squeezing her chest, but that new sound, a faint echo, surged forward, a shimmering thread entwined with her terror. It called to her, soft yet insistent, forcing her to look past the shadows. "Mommy," she heard clearly now, but it was neither Max nor Emma. It was something else, something deeper and richer, a sound that felt like home. The murmur was entwined with familiarity, but it also sent ice into her veins. It was her mother's voice, the one she hadn't heard in years. "Why are you here?" Jess whispered, but the shadows swallowed her words. Moving cautiously, Jess stepped forward, but the ground bucked beneath her, cracking open with vicious snarls. Dark tendrils shot from the fissures, reaching for her ankles. She fought them off, twisting away, her heart hammering like thunder in her ears. Images of Max and Emma flitted in and out of view, faces twisted in fright, drifting ever farther into the obsidian abyss. Mommy. The voices wove in and out, echoing with panic, almost mocking her. Jess stumbled, sinking to her knees as the laughter crescendoed into a deafening roar. The walls trembled as shadows draped themselves over her, blocking out the flickering remnants of light. Face it, Jess. You won't save them, the monster's voice slithered throughout the dark, dripping with malice. It coiled around her mind. You will suffer here forever. No. She yelled futilely, dragging herself across the cracked floor, searching for any trace of her children. Desperation flooded her limbs, igniting a fiery resolve. Their faces remained vivid in her memory, fueling her with strength. I will not give you what you want. As she pressed on, she caught a glimpse of light in the distance, a beacon barely flickering against the sheets of darkness. Hope surged in her chest. Was this the way out, or another trap? Ignoring the shadows that clawed at her, Jess propelled herself toward that ethereal glow. Each step felt like a battle against the strong tide, but she wouldn't give in. The ground trembled beneath her, dark laughter echoing louder, a cacophony of despair. Mommy. Don't leave us. The children's voices crackled through the dark like shattered glass. Each syllable cut deeper than the last. Reaching the light, Jess felt warmth wash over her. She dared to open her eyes fully, momentarily blinded, but then she saw, silhouettes of her children, their outlines unclear, were at the edge of the brightness. Just beyond, something stirred. A writhing mass of shadow watched her with hungry anticipation. In that singular moment of clarity, she recognized the path she stood upon. I will not abandon you. She shouted, her voice heavy with fierce determination. We'll find our way back together. Suddenly, the light flickered violently. Jess sensed the shadow behind her lunging forward, stretching toward the glow like a wave about to engulf the shore. The heat clashed with the suffocating coldness, the air around her crackling with energy. Mommy. Emma's voice was a lifeline as Jess threw herself toward her children with all her might, the shadows snapping at her heels. Yet the mass of darkness behind her was relentless, and she could feel its breath, a rancid, frigid chill creeping up her spine. The ground quaked violently, shaking apart as she grasped for her children. The warmth of their small hands tingled beneath her fingers, a tether she wouldn't let go of. But just as she felt them pulling her back into the light, a deafening roar erupted. The blackness surged forth like a tidal wave, crashing against their heels, a scream of furious desperation. Jess squeezed her eyes shut, holding Max and Emma tightly, bracing for the impact, for whatever fate awaited them. Would their small hands keep her safe from the darkness? Or would they be pulled apart again, lost in the shadows forever? The impact came. Jess braced against an unseen force, the air ripping from her lungs as darkness collapsed around them. For a moment, everything was chaos. Shadows swallowed her whole, devouring every glimpse of light, every whisper of her children's voices. She blinked furiously, struggling to open her eyes against the suffocating blackness. It was thick, suffocating. No matter how hard she fought, how deeply she tried to breathe, it clung to her like wet cloth, dampening her spirit. The fear tightened its grip around her heart like a vice. Stay with me. She cried, but the shadows mocked her cries, whispering her failures back at her. Then, a flicker, a glint of silver slicing through the black. Not the light from before, but something else, sharp and angular. Jess turned, every muscle tense, bracing for whatever horror awaited her. The silvery glimmer darted closer, shimmering like a beacon. Could it be hope? Mommy, we're scared. The voices echoed weakly, distorted and far away. Hold on. She yelled, pushing against the dark. Nothing mattered but reaching that flicker. It was a hand, a point of connection. She forced her knees forward, inching toward the shimmer while fighting to dislodge the creeping shadows. Jess squinted, trying to focus her vision, her heart racing with each forceful pulse. The flicker transformed into a clear image, a door, not just any door, but an old, rusted one, half buried in the darkness, adorned with twisted vines creeping over its surface. She could see it struggling to swing open, only to be forced shut again by the relentless black. "Mom! Please don't leave us!" A cry pierced through the dark, piercing her heart with icy dread. She lunged, her fingers grasping the splintered edge of the door, pulling with all her might. "Don't let go." Jess felt the warmth of their small hands still holding her, but the shadows wrapped tighter around her legs, threatening to drag her down. Jess clenched her jaw, summoning every ounce of strength. "We're getting out of here," she hissed. With a surge of energy, she pushed against the door. The shadows screamed an ear-splitting shriek that reverberated against her bones. Then, in a final push, the door swung wide open. Light poured into the chasm, bright enough to blind. Jess stumbled forward, the children clinging tightly to her waist. They tumbled together into the light, breaking free from the suffocating grip of darkness. For a heartbeat, she reveled in safety, staring at the sanctuary before her, a familiar, sun-drenched corridor lined with family photos, warm and inviting. And then she turned, the relief instantly replaced by dread. The door behind her flickered ominously, shadows clawing at the edges, trying to close once again. She gasped as she caught her breath, scanning the corridor. "Max, Emma. Are you okay?" Their faces were pale, wide-eyed, but they nodded, clinging to her. But as the shadows within the door writhed and twisted into the forms of her fears, memories clawed at her, each one a sharp reminder of how she had failed to protect them before. Then, above the doorframe, an inscription materialized in crimson letters: "You cannot escape what you have invited in." A chill crawled up Jess's spine. What did it mean? What had followed them into this moment? And just as she felt a moment of clarity, something roared behind her, a guttural sound mingled with her children's laughter, twisted and warped. "What do you want?" she screamed, her voice trembling, reverberating against the hallway's walls. The shadows whispered back, the air thickening, "You must choose, Jess. What will you sacrifice to keep them safe?" As the darkness advanced, the true terror sank in. Jess realized that this choice was not made within the blackness. They had been entangled in this web long before they entered. Could she bear the weight of the decision? The shadows were closing in, and every second was another heartbeat, another chance to lose everything she loved. What was she willing to give up to protect them? Time was slipping away. The air thickened, the walls of the corridor almost pulsating with the weight of dread. Jess felt a chill wash over her, a sensation of being watched. She turned slowly, piecing together the dark shapes swirling just beyond the threshold of that cursed door. The laughter, her children's laughter, became a twisted echo, a mocking reminder that happiness was now tainted. Max's grip tightened around her waist, small fingers trembling. "Mommy, I don't like this place." His voice was barely a whisper, swallowed by the heaviness pressing in around them. Instinct shrouded Jess in panic. She scanned the corridor frantically for any sign of escape, any glimmer of hope amid the gathering shadows. "Stay close," she urged, feeling the vibrations of the encroaching darkness rolling in like a freight train. The walls seemed to shrink, the photos jaggedly leering down at them. Each face seemed altered, eyes glinting with malevolent knowledge. These weren't just memories, they were all her failures rolled into one, a gallery of despair sealed within her own home. What do I have to sacrifice? The question hung in the air, still echoing in her mind. Was it her safety? Her freedom? Or perhaps, the most monstrous of all, her own children? The notion curled her stomach in knots, but the whispers grew louder, scraping at the edges of her sanity. Choices loomed in shadows, but answers eluded her like smoke. Suddenly, from behind the encroaching dark, a flicker of movement caught Jess's eye. Something glided forward, its shape rippling, tending toward familiarity. It was her own reflection, distorted and warped. Tendrils of shadow slithered from it, reaching for her like skeletal hands. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing Max and Emma tightly, pulling them toward the warm light at the end of the hallway. But as she sprinted, the chilling voice pierced through her, chilling her to the marrow. You cannot escape, you already chose. The room began to spiral, a dizzying carousel of memories closing in. The kids stumbled, their eyes wide with fright as they struggled to keep up. "Mommy!" they cried, but the shadows surged ahead, blocking their path. In a fierce surge, Jess hurled herself toward the end of the corridor. She had to think fast, each second mattered. Her heart pounded against her ribcage like a desperate drummer announcing doom. Where was the exit? No! The shadows shrieked, and she heard the scraping of claws racing behind them. With a razor-thin decision, she flung herself through the doorway ahead, a door she had never noticed before. It swung open to reveal a room bathed in an eerie crimson glow. The scent of blood and decay washed over her like a thick fog, freezing her breath. She stepped inside, her skin prickling. As Jess's eyes adjusted, she spotted a circle of faded photographs lining the walls, each featuring a family eerily similar to her own, but each one was missing a child. "What is this?" she gasped. Could it be the fate that awaited them? A vision of horror manifesting back in time. Behind her, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside with the manic laughter of their shadows. The room vibrated with tension, walls curling inward. The whispers grew sharper, more insistent, demanding the price for their survival. Each word twisted through Jess's mind like a vine choking her heart. "No, no, no," she mumbled, inching backward until she felt the chill of the wall. The truth threaded itself like a web around her. They had invited this nightmare in with every hidden fear, every imperfect moment. In that suffocating moment, a single, icy realization sliced through the chaos: you are the sacrifice or they are. Her breath hitched, realization exploding like fireworks within. How had she allowed it to come to this? As the laughter grew louder, a shadow erupted from the wall, coiling and expanding. It reached for the children, and Jess felt her heart tear. The choice had to be made, and the clock was ticking. Suddenly, a door began to creak open behind the wall, revealing a blinding light. Was it their escape? Or another trap? Jess felt time squeeze, every heartbeat screaming, and in that instant, she had to choose. What dark bargain lay ahead as the light beckoned? In that blinding light, Jess hesitated. The glow was almost celestial, beckoning her with warm fingers that threatened to soothe the icy grip of dread. But she couldn't shake the sense that it was a trap, a ploy to lure her into the jaws of something far worse than the creeping shadows they had just fled from. "Mommy?" Max's voice broke through her fear, a tiny thread of sanity anchoring her back to reality. He was pulling at her, desperate and wide-eyed, and she could feel Emma's small hand clutching her other wrist, the grip growing tighter as the shadows closed in. Jess breathed deeply, trying to gather her fraying courage. "We need to see if it's real," she whispered, her voice trembling. The fear that wrapped around her throat like a vice squeezed tighter. She could almost see the flickering edges of their reflection in the darkened corners. No. This time would be different. Gingerly, she stepped towards the light, dragging the kids along. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, time warped. The air shimmered, and a soft pulse enveloped them like a hug. Suddenly, they were no longer in that dismal room. They stood in a lush garden, vibrant colors bursting from the flowers around them, the sun warm against their skin. It felt like a scene pulled from the happiest memory she had. But it wasn't right. It was too perfect, too idyllic. Jess tried to quell the rising panic as she surveyed the surreal beauty surrounding them. "What is this?" Emma breathed, her eyes wide as she gazed at the flowers. "It's beautiful, Mommy. Yeah, honey, but we need to be careful." Jess's senses screamed at her. She looked for shadows, searching for any indication that darkness lurked nearby, and then, she saw it, a figure, barely there, flitting between the trees. It was small, cloaked in an aura of malice. A shiver skittered down her spine. "Max, stick close," she hissed, turning slowly, feeling the pulse of shadows just beyond the garden's edge. "Look, Mommy." Emma pointed, her excitement bubbling over as if oblivious to the creeping dread. That lady looks like Grandma. Jess's heart plummeted as she turned to see an elderly woman at the far end of the garden, wearing a flowing white dress that billowed gently in the non-existent breeze. The woman smiled, a warm, inviting smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Come here, sweethearts," she called, her voice soothing yet filled with an undercurrent of something darker. Instinctively, Jess recoiled. "No, we can't go." She steadied Max and Emma, forcing them to stay by her side. The grotesque familiarity of the woman distorted her hope, twisting it into something anxious. Suddenly, the laughter came again, sharp and clean, echoing from behind the woman, bright yet haunting. "Join us. It's safe here." A gnawing voice whispered in her mind, an invitation wrapped in seduction. The walls of the garden shimmered, blurring around the edges, and Jess felt an overwhelming sense of urgency rise within her. It was a voice demanding, compelling. "Choose." The shadows hissed from the borders of the garden, ever present and circling like vultures. "Mommy, I'm scared," Max whimpered, squeezing her hand. Jess's heart raced. Every second she hesitated tightened the knot of terror coiling in her stomach. The door to escape was slowly fading behind them as they stood fragile on the precipice of a decision. In that moment, she saw it clearly, a choice. The garden could be their sanctuary or their ultimate trap, laced with deceit, a delicacy offered on a platter of despair. Either path bore consequences, the stakes had never been clearer. "Mommy," Emma whimpered again, eyes glistening with unshed tears as Jess weighed the heavy decision in her mind. Could she trust this illusion? Or would it lead them deeper into darkness? "Let us go back," she suddenly declared, nearly pulling her children away from the warmth of what felt like false hope. Just as she turned, the shadows surged forward. "Choose," they howled, and the sound sliced the air like a knife. What twisted fate awaited them in this battle? Jess felt the air narrow again, every heartbeat becoming a countdown. Would they ever find their way back to the light? Or would they surrender to the encroaching darkness, losing themselves forever? Jess's heart raced as the garden of false hope began to fracture around them. The vibrant colors lost their luster, turning into muted shades of gray, as if the very essence of joy was being siphoned away. "No! We're leaving!" she shouted defiantly, clutching Max and Emma's hands tighter. The shadows hissed, an eerie sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You can't escape the darkness, Jess. You've brought it here." It was Mr. Reed's voice echoing through the garden, twisted and distorted. Panic surged in her chest. She couldn't let them take her children, couldn't let the shadows close in. As she turned her back on the deceptive glow, the garden pulsated and shifted. The warm light dimmed into a gaping maw of darkness, shadows reaching toward them like grasping fingers. "We can't go back," Emma cried, her voice quaking. "Yes, we can, we have to," Jess shouted back, her voice fierce. She felt the ground trembling beneath them, the remnants of the garden slithering away into nothingness. The familiar warmth of her memories pulled her forward, the laughter in the living room, the sweetness of bedtime stories, the safety she could create. "We can fight this." The shadows loomed closer, washing over her, trying to extinguish that flicker of hope. Yet, tearing through the smothering veil, Jess made a choice. "I refuse to let you tear my family apart," she bellowed, evoking every ounce of strength within her. The landscape shifted again. From the coils of shadows, images began rising, faces of children from the town, each one a tale of sorrow, memories of joy twisted into terror. Jess steeled herself, seeing each child reach out to her, imploring her to save them, to free them all. "Max! Emma!" she cried desperately, feeling the ominous weight of despair pushing down on her. "We have to break the cycle." Together, they bolted towards the fading light that still shone beneath the heavy darkness. Jess felt like she was diving back into herself, reaching for a resolve she didn't know was there. Each step bolstered her confidence, pushing against the darkness with sheer will. "Hold tight," she said, and without hesitation, she flung herself towards the remaining glimmer, calling forth each loving moment she'd ever shared with them. The laughter of the past mingled with the whispers of the present, growing louder, harmonizing into a single, powerful chorus of remembrance. "Mommy!" Max cried, his voice breaking through the rising tension. "Mommy, I'm scared." Emma echoed, squeezing her hand. "Don't be," Jess urged. "We're together. We can't be lost if we stay together. We won t let them win." Suddenly, the ground erupted in a blinding burst of light. Jess shielded her eyes, the brilliant heat rushing around them, consuming the shadows. The light expanded, pushing back against the darkness as if it had a life of its own. A voice, now clear, resonated through the chaos, the voice of her mother. "You've chosen to protect them, Jess. Keep your heart close." Jess opened her eyes, and what she saw was pure light, a world unblemished by shadows, a peaceful landscape of color and warmth. The silhouettes of Max and Emma floated beside her, their panicked expressions melting into soft smiles. "We're home," she whispered in disbelief, tears spilling down her cheeks as she pulled them into her arms, embracing them tightly. The shadows dissipated into the light, narrowed and then consumed, echoing their last cries into oblivion. Jess smiled through her tears, relief flooding her heart. They had broken free. She could feel the weight lift from her chest, a burden exchanged for the sweet solace of her family. They were safe again, free from the darkness that had once seeped into their lives. As they stood together, surrounded by brightly blooming flowers and a golden sky, Jess knew this would be their new beginning. A life redefined, fortified by love and light. "Let us make our home brighter," she said, her voice thick with emotion, yet filled with determination. "Together." Max and Emma nodded, their eyes gleaming with excitement, ready to explore the beauty around them. The shadows had lost, but Jess would forever guard against their return. She had chosen love, and in that choice, they would flourish. Now, as we conclude this chilling tale, there is something you need to do: subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support means everything. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Don't hold back. And you must share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions.